Hey there, tall, small, and in the walls. I'm Ashlynn. According to all of the interests online from all of you, apparently, you're interested in my borrower side. So I'm not really good at talking about stuff. I'm not really good about all of this. So I've got some questions here. Everything's already been all set up for me. I hope I'm talking into this thing correctly. It's towering above me, so let's get started. Well, I guess you can't really hear me. Whatever. Let's go to the questions. I'm not really good at transitions. This whole technology thing is just a lot. Reading. Let's go. Have you ever had other borrower friends, not counting your family? Yes. Yes, I did have a bunch of friends growing up. We had this little area. Well, no, it's weird. It's so weird trying to talk about all of this because, you guys aren't supposed to know, but evidently all of you people know about us and about all of our backstories and lives and how we do things. And you guys are able to create like so many awesome pieces of art, and that you all have this admiration. And it's weird talking about it because even though there's no one here right now, it really feels weird. I'll get over it. Yes, I did have a bunch of borrower friends. We had this little place outside where all of us who lived in the different houses and just outside of the houses could actually go. It was this little creek, this little park that we could actually go, and we would play with the leaves. We would find acorn hats. We would find all of these different things out in the wilderness, and then we would sometimes bring those back. At one point, one of the guys had this roly-poly collection. It was almost like he had this bottle that, I mean, he didn't really necessarily have the bottle. It was just something that was discarded, but he was able to like carve a little hole in the top, and he had this like partial terrarium thing on the inside, and he had all of these little roly-poly bugs that he went and named and was able to tell them all apart. So I think in total, it, it seemed like there were a lot of us, and everybody was kind of always changing in and out. Like one day, one family wouldn't show up, but then like a new set of, parents and kids would show up, or sometimes it was just someone who was a little bit older. Sometimes they would show up. It was just kind of this like rotating door. By the time I became a teenager, though, a bunch of the families had already moved away, and we weren't getting a whole group of new people. And simultaneously, a lot of other things happened. So it didn't necessarily, I was spending more time borrowing than actually going and trying to be social and hang out with other people. I hope that answers your question. You've mentioned you have a brother. How old are you, and why did you leave your family? This ties in with what I was talking about just a second ago. I think, curse Narrans, they put together all of the questions kind of in sequential order so that it would be easy to read some of these and one tying into the next, because they don't know the answers because I talked to them about it. Yes, I have a brother and I have a younger half brother. When the other families were leaving, my dad ended up going as well. He, like, there was this kind of, it's, uh, this is one of those hard things that some people just don't like talking about. But you asked, so it feels only right. There was a different borrower who came into the group, and she was very pretty, and she was young, and she managed to convince my dad to essentially run away with her. And she's a scumbag for even doing something like that. And I can't believe that, like, we would have a bunch of people over for dinner, and she would come over with all of the other borrowers, because it was this big community. We would all get together and do stuff. And so she ended up talking a lot to my dad. And even whenever I was younger, I thought something was like a little bit weird, but one day, like, I actually saw them together doing things that I know they weren't supposed to. Ugh, I still get heated about it. He ended up leaving, and I ended up telling my brother, because, like, one of the reasons why a bunch of families left is because um there were a bunch of, like, neighborhood cats that also kind of moved in. It's it's one of those wives' tale, like, borrower theories of, oh, like, don't get too many of us together because otherwise it attracts trouble. And this was kind of one of those things that ended up attracting trouble. And, like, some of the other families, that was why some of the other families left, is because the like, some of the kids got hurt. It was really a rough time. It was really tragic. And during that time, whenever all of these families left, my dad went with her. And I couldn't bring myself to tell my brother what I had seen. And my mom, I think she suspected what was going on, but didn't want to accept it. She wanted to just kind of blame the cats. And so that's what I told my brother when mom would just kind of get quiet about stuff. And that made it all the better when he came back and he had our half brother and this new girl. And my brother confronted me and was like, hey, like, you said that this horrible thing happened to our dad, and he's back. He was a lot more forgiving than I was. And so, yeah, from 13 until I was 18, that was just kind of something that happened. And then shortly after, I ended up kind of like living on my own. I was still nearby, but I would run into them from time to time. And it got to the point where I just needed to leave and get away from them and get away from the situation, because I felt guilty about telling my brother this lie, but I was trying to spare him the feelings of everything else that was going on. And because of our age difference, he seemed really young at the time to be told these things, and my mom wasn't being any help in that regard. So anyway, that's a little bit about my family dynamic. Uh, yeah, why did I leave my family? Yeah, that ultimately is the reason why I ended up leaving them. And not just like moving to a different house, but eventually just moving much, much further away. Like, houses and houses. I jumped from place to place for a really long time. Golly, you guys started off heavy. Okay, now we should have started with this other question here. Are my what human foods are my favorites to cook? And then, do I like cooking? Yes, I absolutely love cooking. I well, I'm just because I like cooking doesn't mean that I'm good at it. Let me make a very clear distinction between that, especially with some of the limited spices and everything else that we, as borrowers, don't always have access to. So when you're going into the kitchen and you're looking around, sometimes, like, for a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, you have to, like, climb up on top of the bottle or the jar, and you kind of have to, like, sweep up the edges. And so sometimes you can't really season what it is that you're working with. So it's more often than not, comes off a little bit bland. And I only say that because I've been spoiled. And I know that I've been spoiled because Soren's cooking is amazing. Ugh, very, very good. Definitely should ask him about all of the stuff that he knows how to cook. because his brothers definitely take him for granted. I try not to take his cooking for granted. They are only interested in junk food, but Soren knows how to cook really well. But for me, I have been learning more about how to incorporate the spices and how to make things the way that he does. So I'm getting better at cooking. I do enjoy cooking. One of my favorite things pre talking to Soren is probably, yeah, no, it's a guilty pleasure. I love macaroni and cheese. Oh, like if you can find fresh cheese and if you can get it to melt at that perfect level, and then noodles, they keep forever. Like you can have noodles, and as long as they don't get wet, you can just like hack off a couple of little pieces and then you boil them, and it just makes for a fantastic meal, and it's warm and it's sticky and gooey and wonderful. I do like macaroni and cheese a lot. And sometimes it's hard to find fresh ingredients, and that's one of the easier ones, at least from my perspective. It's one of the easier ones to rehydrate and bring back to life. Like if you borrow like some meat, for example, like you have to eat it like that day, and even then that could be sus. Absolutely, totally could be sus. If you find vegetables, those don't always keep, so you try and incorporate those. But for practicality and for cooking, like you can find a little bit of cheese that's like fallen in between the stove and stuff. Yes, okay, it might be gross, but a quick borrow is really safe. If you like scrape off the outsides, then you can kind of get like it creates that nice film coating on the outside. I don't know if I'm selling my case or not, but no, macaroni pre-meeting Soren, I enjoyed making macaroni and cheese. I still like making macaroni and cheese, but now that he's taught me a few tricks and stuff, I know how to make it better. Post meeting Soren, I have to admit I really like tacos. Figuring out how to cut all of the ingredients of fajita, that's what it is. Um, I'm not a huge fan of the onions, specifically cutting the onions, because it makes my eyes water, and I don't like it when my eyes water because that's just painful. Like, why would anybody who came up with that? What human found this thing that was in the ground and dug it up and decided to cut it up and eat it consistently? It's not just like a one-time thing, it's a consistent thing. Whatever the case, as long as Soren does some of the prep work and everything else, I do like me some tacos. So fajitas, you put it on like a little, what's it called? The bread, is it tortilla? Yeah, it's a tortilla. And so you put it on the tortilla, and then you add it to the cheese. Maybe I just have a thing for cheese. I gotta think about that. But yeah, you got the cheese, which is that fancy stuff, and you dunk it in there. Oh, it's so good. Really, really good. Going on to a different one. What happened to my brother? We're back to this. We're back to this. Okay. Nothing actually happened to my brother. Nothing actually happened to him. For all I know, from where he and my mom and my dad and my half brother and his new wife are, they're all fine. And either my mom has either come to terms or she's just passively agreeing to live in that same area. Nothing's actually happened to him. He just hates me because I tried to spare his feelings and I told him a really big lie. Yeah. I'd do it again, you know. I'd definitely do it again. If it came down to him being hurt, in that moment of me saying like, oh, like dad's never coming back, and trying to tell him the alternative. I feel like if I told him the alternative, he would feel like he wasn't enough. And my dad has this like smooth way with words, so he was able to convince my brother that like he still loved him and that it was a mistake. Or at the time, there was a bunch of things. I don't even remember the excuses. I only heard ringing the moment like he walked back in. I only heard ringing in my ears, and I'm pretty sure I slugged him as hard as I could across the jaw. This would have been when I was 17, getting ready to turn 18, because the moment I turned 18, I left. And basically started living in a different part of the house. Like, we had this really nice setup, actually, right in like the walls of the kitchen. So there was like a little panel that we could actually slip into the cabinets. We were actually able to go directly into the cabinets, and had this kind of like half wall segment that we were like behind the cabinets. I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly. We were inside the walls, but the where we were was directly attached like to where the human cabinets were on the other side of the wall. I think that's a better way of putting it. And so anytime we needed something, we were able to slip in and out fairly easily. So I ended up moving to a different part of the attic. And then anytime I needed to go and get food or spice or anything else like that, I would end up going by that place and seeing all of them together, and just watching, like, yeah, just watching all of them together. And I think my mom forgave him. I think after that long, I think she still was in love with him. And just knowing that he was alive was enough for her. It obviously wasn't enough for me. He should not have done that. So yeah, nothing happened to my brother. He is, even though I know he doesn't ever want to see me again, and based on how we live as borrowers, we probably won't see each other ever again. I still hope he's happy. What if he's alive? He is. At least when I left, he was. If we were to meet up again, how would I explain that I'm friends with humans? I probably wouldn't. I would probably do what I did to my dad and slug him in the face and ask what on earth he was doing, trying to find me, follow me. If that's even something that he would do, which I don't think he would. But how, oh goodness, how would I explain that? I might use that as a scare tactic just to get back at him after what he put me through. No, because I'm a softie when it comes to him. I wouldn't do that. I would probably explain my injuries and kind of the circumstances surrounding it. I would think that I would quote unquote be accidentally seen with them, and hopefully like my brother would be listening in and he would actually like hear from Soren and Dorian and Ray and be able to hear that, like almost like a fake reminiscing session, so that he could kind of understand what was going on and why. So, to be honest, something like that has never really crossed my mind, because the concept of him coming back into my life just seems so unfathomable. And it hurts. It hurts just to think about. So ultimately, if I had to tell him, I would probably try to accidentally, on purpose, be seen with the boys, with Soren. And if I did see him, my anger, my frustration, because sometimes I have a little bit of a temper, that would probably get the better of me. And I probably wouldn't tell him about the boys because let's be honest, if he found me, if he was able to come all the way from where we were living, if he managed to track me down to the exact place where we are, that means that he was trying to find me. And if he's trying to find me, he either feels a lot of remorse, which I know he probably doesn't, or alternatively, like he needs something. And if he needs something, that means that he's not really caring about me, he's caring about whatever it is that he's looking for. And that would mean that he's really, really, really desperate, at which point it might behoove me to immediately throw him to the wolves, or in this case the humans, and let him experience that. And I don't know, maybe I come in, save the day. I don't even know. Sorry, I wish I had a better answer for that. It's just one of those things that I haven't thought about, and I don't know if I want to think really hard about how I would try and explain that to him. Maybe I feel guilty, maybe not, I don't know. Moving on. Um, what is some of my history? Well, I was born, I was raised, I did stuff and things. Okay, I'll be a little bit more specific. So, the house that I ended up growing up in was a, it was old, but it wasn't super old. It was one of those almost new houses built like within my lifetime kind of things. Like that's like when my parents moved in, the reason why they were able to like carve holes into the cabinets and everything else is because they arrived when the house was actually being built. And so that just made everything that much easier, and they were able to actually map out the inside of the house. And so I was born in the house was that was like being constructed, and that was really cool because they were able to make passages and cuts into walls that I know that other houses definitely didn't have, because like it was only after, I guess maybe it was a neighborhood that was being built. I don't really know, but I know that all of the other borrower kids, whenever we were young and playing around and stuff, like I would have like these little hiding places that I could go for. We were playing hide and seek, or yeah, hide from the human, essentially, is what the game was. If we were playing a game like that, none of them could ever find me, and it was because we had these like separate, like hidden, carved places where I could go hide that my parents had ended up making because they were able to do that whenever the house was being built. Um, there's there was a swing. I remember there was this. I guess it was from a kite or something. Maybe it was a fishing line. It was a very thin but kind of soft string that actually went out across the stream. And so going and swinging on that during the summer times and like jumping into the water, because I do know how to swim just a little bit. I can like stay above water. I'm not going to drown because that is a terrifying way to die. Just throwing that out there. Also, getting eaten by snakes or cotton cobwebs and then eaten by spiders. I hate spiders. I hate snakes. And I hate the thought of drowning. But that was a really fun swing, so that was something that we ended up doing a lot. Um, I went on my first borrowing mission when I was 8, and it was totally on accident. My parents were having a quote unquote discussion. I think it was about something that my brother had did. No, he broke something. That's what it was. There was a dish, like from a dollhouse dish, like a plate, that he, I guess, had been playing with, and he threw it down the shaft and it shattered into a whole bunch of pieces. And they were worried that we were going to have to move, and they were wondering if any of the humans heard it. And because it was one of those special items that was our size, anytime we can find something like that, we try and hang on to it and take really good care of it, just because it means that we don't have to use other supplies or try and manufacture something ourselves. And it was a total fluke. It was a total accident because I was off kind of playing and I heard them discussing this. I remembered seeing supplies and everything else. Like mom and dad were already like teaching me how to borrow at this point. So I already had the fundamentals kind of in the back of my head. And I ended up going to I happened to be going by the playroom as I heard them discussing loudly about what to do with my brother and whether or not they should do this thing. And so whenever I just meandered over there and was like, well, I'm like, I'll just go ahead and borrow that myself. And so I made my way. It was a miracle that I didn't get caught. But I went in there and I found a replica dish and I put it in my bag and I went on home. I might have gotten a stern talking to also, but it was almost immediately negated by the astonishment that I had went and done this thing and then had like made it back safe, like totally on my own. That was really cool. Okay. So that's a little bit of my history. That's like first borrowing mission. Did you, I guess you, if you wanted to know more, I guess you could put that in the comments and maybe Narrans will oblige and fill in some of the gaps. Oh, uh, uh, I don't, I don't know if I want to answer this next question. You crushing on Soren so early, even though he's human? No. Okay, look, here's the thing. He's so great. He really is. And if he were a borrower, then, like, there's just something about watching him with his brothers. There's just something about, like, talking to him and everything else. He's very sweet. And he's really great. And, I'm a little bit older, at least I mean, I'm not old, but there are certain things that, I find myself getting interested in. And even though that can't really happen with him, that doesn't mean that he doesn't have all of the qualities that I'm looking for. And, it's not the worst thing in the world when I see him shirtless and all of a sudden there's feelings. Okay, I think I'm done with that. It's just rough questions. Oh, so many questions. Have I gone anywhere fun with the boys? I really hope you guys aren't going to ask any more questions about how I feel about Soren. Are you? I haven't read through all of the questions, even though they've already been compiled. You're not going to ask anything else about that. Are you? Are you? Guys? Okay. Have you gone anywhere fun with the boys? I'm trying to think. If we're talking about are we talking about as like a big group, or are we talking about just like Dorian and Ray? Because Dorian and Ray, they actually did sneak me out one day, with permission, obviously. They did take me to an ice cream shop for the first time, because they were talking about something. This has been a little while into getting to know them, but apparently there was this like ice cream shop that had just opened up, and it was just right down the street, and it was one of those things that Soren would actually like let them go. This is a little bit, like I said, the boys are a little bit older now, obviously. So he actually would let them like go down the street. It is actually like however many blocks away. Like Soren, if he stood out on the edge of the road, he could watch his brothers the entire way. So they did sneak me out one day. Like Soren was right behind him, but they went into this ice cream parlor. And so, because they were trying to describe like the smell of this place, and they were like, "Oh yeah, like you can smell the sweets and da 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 da," and I was like, I don't know if I really believe that, like, and so they're like, "Oh, we're gonna show you," and so, uh, even though Soren was like, like we need to like better plan like outings and stuff like that. He had mentioned it in passing when the boys were like, "Hey, let's go do something with Ashlynn," and Soren was like, "Hey, that might not be a good idea, guys," and they ended up doing it anyway. So we ended up going to an ice cream parlor, and I thought that was really fun, and it was really sweet because the boys were trying to be like covert. They were trying to be stealthy, but they're also kids. And I mean, obviously, my first encounter with them wasn't necessarily the greatest. Um, being totally truthful, I sometimes still have nightmares about that. They, like in my dream, they don't look like them. Obviously, they have different features, like things are distorted and things look a lot more intimidating, a lot scarier. But the whole circumstance surrounding what actually happened, every once in a while I do have nightmares about that, but after like getting to know them, after earning my trust back, or at least earning it, because we didn't know each other at the time, but earning my trust, they were really putting forth an effort to try and incorporate me and show me all of these things and treat me like a person. I thought that was really cool. And then briefly, as an entire group talking about doing something fun with the boys, I actually went and saw a movie with them, actually in the movie theaters. Soren was in charge of that particular encounter, and he was the one who ended up wearing a hoodie, and I ended up getting to like sit there, kind of like in the folds of this thing and actually watch the movie. It was a kids' movie. I can't remember what it was about. It was entertaining at the very least, but my mind might have been distracted elsewhere. Not to sound totally weird, but Soren smells absolutely amazing. I don't know what he does, but it is fantastic. And I might have been distracted with that most of the movie. I said I was going to talk about this anymore. Moving on. Do I still go out borrowing? Yes, absolutely. I am not going to let my skills get flabby. I am going to keep on keeping on. Sometimes I borrow with the boys, and we sometimes like make it a game. But usually I go elsewhere in order to do that. Kind of like everyone else's 9 to 5 or whatever they call that, like their job. That's kind of what I do. Is I will say like, oh, I'm gonna go do something, and then I leave for a while, and then I essentially go to some of the other apartments. I have taken a few different day trips where I will go to an entirely different building and go do things, and that's like I let them know. Obviously, I let them know. It it would be mean if I were just like, hey, I'm gonna be gone, and then I leave, and then that's just gonna make them panic. And I don't want them. I don't want them to freak out. I don't want Soren to worry because he is a worrier. He would hate to admit it, but he definitely is a worrier. Warrior and worrier. Ugh. And the boys would absolutely insist that they go on a search mission and would be outside looking around, and that might cause suspicion. So I try to make sure that I let the boys know, all of them, Soren, Dorian, Ray, that I'm going to be gone if it's going to be for more than an afternoon. That way, if something does happen, then they have an idea of where to find me, what to look for. Thankfully, nothing has ever happened. Obviously, nothing's ever happened while I've been out and about. They just, they're very respectful of my privacy, and when I'm feeling a little bit too dependent on them, and I hope that makes sense, there's something to be said about doing something on your own. Like that feels really good to do something on your own. And there's no shame in helping or getting help from others. And if you can provide something great, like that's one of the things that I'm able to help the boys do, is not only we're practicing various empathy skills, but when it comes to construction, when it comes to inventions, Ray is kind of getting into tinkering now, him being a little bit younger than I was when I started doing my own inventions. Which, getting to see that's also super, super cool. Because in a way, he's kind of like a big borrower, where he'll go and he'll borrow things from Soren, and then he'll come back and he'll try to make some kind of construction. He'll try to make something or another. So I try and offer my insights into that if something needs resetting, if something, like Soren was doing something with the wires and he needed help with the wires. And so, like, I was able to, like, run things, like, up and down through the walls, and that made things a lot easier for him. So we have a good relationship between all of us. We're able to do all sorts of things together. What advice would you give to a human that is trying to befriend a borrower, and vice versa? My first question is, why are you trying to befriend a borrower? Like, have you found evidence? And there are just so many questions that go along with that. Like, are you? I mean, hopefully you're not hunting them or anything along those lines. Sorry, my mind's racing. If you're trying to befriend a borrower, you... how do I say this without coming off as, like, weird? You need to not try. Like, you, like, make it obvious, but don't make it obvious. Like, if it were me, like, I'd leave things out that were, like, a little bit harder to borrow. Like, I mean, the common everyday items, like, we need, like, bobby pins, twist ties, any type of discarded razor, some, like, ribbons, cloth, anything that we necessarily, like, we need. If you leave it out, that definitely raises all of the red flags. That raises every suspicion that we've ever had, and we know that, someone else knows. But if it's, like, easier to get to, and then just, like, I guess a slow progression from that point on. So if you find evidence that a borrower's, like, living in your house, like, don't make it obvious that you're trying to help, because they'll start piecing everything together real quick. And at that point, if you change any of your other behaviors, that would make me run. If I'm being totally honest, that would make me run. If I found, like, a box of bobby pins that were just out, or thumbtacks that were just out, easy, and there was no other explanation, like, if I don't see a cork board, if I don't see a project that's out, and it's just in the middle of the desk, the countertop, I'm going to think that, like, I messed up. I'm going to think that I've been spotted. Holy smokes, I need to get out of here, because they know about me. So Anyway, I that would be probably my advice is make things more easily accessible so that like you're helping without directly knowing. And if you happen to see, like, if you make eye contact, just don't react and just go back to whatever it was that you were doing, because that's gonna, at least from my perspective, and everybody's different. Like everybody's reaction is gonna be different, and like just coming from my perspective, if I made some kind of sound, for example, and a human looked over and saw me, and like it was very obvious that that I was spotted, and they didn't do anything. They just looked, kind of acknowledged without saying anything, and just went back to doing whatever it was that they were doing. That would make me question, like, oh, like they left me alone, why? And so then I'd be more inclined to go back and try and like figure out the answers. Which, if you think about it, that's almost what Dorian and Ray, when I left, whenever I was well enough and I left to live back in the walls for a little while, um, that's kind of like what they were doing. Like they needed help with something, and because like I had a previous experience, I was more willing to kind of come out and help. They already knew about me, but the fact that they didn't react beyond what, like they obviously noticed me, but they didn't react beyond that. They like let me go, they let me get away, and that made me think of like, okay, like they notice me, they see me, but they're not doing anything about it. And so that kind of helped ease that transition of going and like talking to them regularly, if that makes any sense. So yeah. Um, have you seen the other borrower that called me a pet since she left? um, I've seen glimpses of her. Yeah. This is usually whenever I go over to like one of the other houses, like what I was just talking about, whenever I go borrowing, and like sometimes I'm not doing that directly in the house, I'm doing that elsewhere. I've seen her a couple of times. We haven't said anything to each other, and probably rightfully so. She sees me and then kind of takes off running, and then I'll find her like in a different house whenever I've gone kind of like on this like circle of like, because there are a bunch of apartments nearby, and so she's kind of staying in like the near-ish by area, and it's probably because of the weather. It's probably because maybe she's curious, maybe she wants to know more. I know if I walked in a situation like that, I would probably just not look back and keep on going. But I haven't willingly tried to like go out and make contact with her. And after everything that she said, I don't know if I could be civil if she were to approach and ask like, hey, how's everything going? You are obviously not in a cage, so what's up with that? Um, yeah, no, I would definitely have some choice words about that. What do I do when the boys are away? Um, yeah, I have various crafts and things that I work on. Like I was kind of mentioning before, I'm learning a little bit more about cooking. I'm learning more about reading. Like I know how to read, but I'm trying to get into more interesting things. Mostly because I was listening to Soren read these different books to his brothers, and I was enjoying it so much. And then Soren actually lost his voice. It was after a really bad cold. And so the boys asked if I could help read, and that ended up sparking an entirely uncomfortable conversation about what I could or couldn't read. And trying to figure out different sounds because for a long time there were some words that I didn't realize were pronounced in a different way or didn't realize they were spelled in different ways. There were like certain like baseline words that I could understand just by reading. So I've been learning a little bit more about that, working on some personal craft projects. The boys' birthdays are kind of coming up. So, and with like, I mean, there are other holidays and stuff. If I don't start working on things now, they're never going to get done in time, especially since I have to make them so much bigger for a human. So I've been working on some things for the boys. So I've been doing that. An exercise regimen, I actively make sure that I am exercising. I can still feel every once in a while, like with my shoulder, like my range isn't perfect every single time like it used to be. So working on that. Yeah, no. Most of the time is me exploring, and I did there was one time where I did actually go with Soren like out to where he worked because like, he wanted to show me like some of the stuff that he does. So it was during a day when like they weren't going to be super busy or like a bunch of people were already out of the office at the time. And so, or like it was his day off and he knew they were on a bunch of calls. And so he actually like took me there. So I was actually able to see a little bit of what he does, which that is astounding and explains so much about some of the burns on his arms. It doesn't explain all of his scars. And even though I'm curious, not, I don't want to ask and pry too much about those things. But anyway, going on to the next question. How do I feel about size differences in media? Iron Giant, Indian in the Cupboard, Rescuers. To be honest, I didn't, at least in my head, I didn't think there would be that much out there. Like, I mean, the concept was always like, oh, like everyone's, going to be fascinated. They're going to, treat you like a pet and everything else. Like, that's always been my mentality. And then seeing connections and relationships form between people, like, of that size difference. Like, we recently did watch some of these shows. Like, the boys are young, and we've actually seen some of these. And seeing everyone's interaction and how that mirrors a lot of my interactions with Soren and the others. I don't know. It kind of gives me a hope that anybody else who might be in my position where like you end up getting found by humans that you wouldn't be captured, that you would be seen as a person. And I mean, obviously, as a borrower, that's not necessarily something that we are familiar with, but humans would be. Any human who's ever seen this and kind of relates to the situation is curious about it. That in of itself is reassuring that maybe they would be more accepting, more understanding, even though, like, I mean, we're terrified. Even now, sometimes, even with the trust that he's earned, when sometimes Soren will like absent-mindedly reach over me for something that's like on the other side, I still feel myself flinch, even though I know like nothing's going to happen. But it's that part is just instinct, and it's the trust that he's earned that like makes me not run away. And hopefully media and stuff like that, like all of these movies and books that are out there, hopefully like this other question about like what would you do if someone was like trying to befriend a borrower, hopefully that gives some insight for other people so that they treat us like anybody else. Because that's one thing that I've really noticed is we're not so different. I mean, there are some very obvious differences, but we're still the same in a lot of ways. How do I prefer to be carried? Ooh, okay. Definitely a little more personal. I if being carried is either necessary or I don't know, maybe I don't know why I'm feeling embarrassed about it, answering this question. Um, it depends on who's holding me or who's helping carry me from one place to the other. Um, I prefer the shoulders just because that gives me more free range of motion. But if it has to be like if we're talking about like positions, ugh, I don't know, I don't like putting it like that. I don't like being pinched. I don't like being confined. That just it sets my brain on fire with panic and getting, I have to get out of here. Um, probably probably the left hand. Um, like if it's a one-handed carry, I'm thinking specifically yes of Soren. Because I like laying kind of like on my right side. Yeah, like I like laying on my right side, and so his thumb has a good kind of cushion, like that little notch right there by his thumb, and it kind of lets me rest my head there. So, um, open palm carry is probably my favorite. Um, if it's Dorian or Ray, obviously two hands. They have much smaller hands. Um, I don't like the t-shirt pinch in the back. Like we've played some games and the boys didn't know, obviously, but it was kind of like a, catch me if you can kind of game. And maybe it was foolish, maybe it was stupid to even try something like that, but it was essentially like an obstacle course, and so we were all like running this obstacle course, and they had to quote unquote catch me, which definitely was panic inducing. But it was Ray who actually managed to snag like the very edges of my shirt, and like the way that it pulls back is confining. No matter how baggy your clothes are, anytime you're pinched from behind, it automatically restricts your shoulders, so your arms are automatically kind of pinned, and you can only like barely move your elbows forward. So I don't like being pinched from behind. I don't like being held upside down. It might be easier to say all the things that I don't like, and then just kind of deduce it from there. So yeah, I don't like it when my legs are pinched. I don't like when my arms are pinched, obviously, because my injury. So yeah, open palm carry, shoulder carry. Um, I don't mind pockets so much as long as it's like a front pocket. If it's a side pocket, I don't think you humans realize how much jostling actually happens when you are in a side pocket. Like even if your hand is like stabilized, like if your hand is like in there in the same pocket with you, and the way that it jostles and moves around, I don't think you know how much jostling actually happens. So, at least in a front pocket, there's just like a gentle sway, all propelled with like forward motion. So, shoulder, open hand, pocket. Top three. No pinching, no grabbing, no seizing, no pinning. Definitely no pinning. Have I ever thought about what it would be like to be human? Yeah, I have. And no, I don't want to say that. Now that I said it, I gotta say it. I have had a few dreams where I may or may not have been human. And, certain people happen to be in the dream, and it's really nice. And that's all I'm gonna say about that. I have thought about what it would be like to be human, and I think it would be great. I think it would be easier than being a borrower. And maybe it's just because I don't know and I don't understand what it's really like to be human. I think that I wouldn't entirely be myself, like I'd be me, but I'd be a different version of me if I were human. I don't even know what I would do as a human. But yeah, I have thought about it. I like the idea of like being able to just interact with the boys, and like instead of them grabbing me, like I'm able to like go and hug them. I'm able to like snuggle or play or kiss, like just like them. uh, Moving on, what would your family think about you living with Soren and the boys? They'd hate it. Absolutely hate it. They they wouldn't understand. They would probably be ashamed that I didn't follow any of the rules because you're supposed to leave like immediately. Um, and the fact that I even considered staying, like even with my injury, like they would probably still be like, "Oh my goodness, like you didn't leave after you were let go, even though you were injured." Like they probably would say something along those lines. What do you do to help around the home? A lot of it is cleaning related, getting into places that they can't get. Like I said before, like the running the wires in the walls. Anytime like there's something that might be going wrong in like one of the other apartments, trying to go in and investigate. There was a water leak in one of the other apartments that ended up like, ruining part of the roof in like the living room. And so like that had to be taken care of. So that's usually one of the ways that I help around the home. Organizing. I'm really, really good at organizing. Like, not to toot my own horn, but I am fantastic at it. So, and spatial awareness things. So when the boys are like trying to put their toys away, like that's just one example, but they forget that like there's a back part of the drawer. And so me being like, oh, like organize this here, put this here, this will make everything fit. I am very gifted, I'll say, in arranging things so that they all fit. And maybe that's just the way that the borrower brain works. But being aware of what size everything is and how it can all fit together to optimize space. I'd consider myself an expert. Moving on. Do Dorian and Ray still feel bad for keeping me in the drawer? Yes. Yes, they do. And sometimes I say it jokingly. And like some days they kind of tease me about it. And then some days they feel like really, really bad about it. But most of the time they feel really bad about it. And it's, like I was saying before, it's reassuring that they know what they did wrong. Like they feel bad about what they did. And it's also been something that I have had to learn about, like forgiving them and letting them earn back that trust. Because yeah, that was messed up. That was terrifying. But they're also kids. And that doesn't necessarily excuse what they did. But if I were raised the way that they were, I don't know if I would have made a different decision. I'd like to think that I wouldn't have. And to be totally fair, if I have to be honest about it, I I was falling. Like if I had fallen from that height, I would probably be dead. Dorian didn't mean to hurt me. Like whenever like he reached out and grabbed my arm out of instinct, and it was because I was falling and because of like the angle that he managed to grab me. Like that's what ended up like dislocating my arm. That's what ended up hurting me. But had I fallen that distance in my state of being, I probably would. That fall would have killed me. Because most of the time borrowers are really good at almost like, even as I think about it, I don't like it, but like a cat. Like cats land on their feet. Borrowers are able to fall greater distances and be fine, but we have to be able to like land properly. And if we can't land properly, that means that we're going to get hurt. And based on the way that I was falling, I really, really, really thought about it. This was like when I was basically bedridden and delirious with sick and kind of coming out of that fog. I, thinking back, I probably wouldn't have been able to turn my body enough in time to reorient myself to make myself be okay. So Dorian did save my life. Even though I ended up getting hurt, and even though it landed me in the drawer and put me on this entirely different trajectory of life, I'm glad that he did what he did. And so when that comes up and whenever we're both like feeling bad about it or for like being playful about it, you can still see that they feel bad about it, even though I have told them that it wasn't their fault and that thankfully that was the worst part of it. Things could have been a lot worse for me. Do I ever ask for uppies? Uppies? You're talking like being picked up? Um, I don't necessarily ask it in that way, but if the guys happen to be going someplace and I don't feel like sprinting after them, um, I'll usually tag Soren in on one of those things and have him like have him get me and take me to whatever it is location that we happen to be going. Because no offense to Dorian and Ray, but the way they run, it's hang on, what's that show? Like the Muppets. Like he sometimes they run like the little green character, the frog. Sometimes they like the way that he flails his arms. Sometimes they run like that, and it's spastic, and it is absolutely ludicrous. And they need to not run like that because it when like the few times that they've got me and were the ones who are like bringing me to like if we were in their room doing something and they need help and someone needs help with dinner, we're gonna eat food. If it's movie night, it's like Ray taking me from the kitchen into the living room. Sometimes they just get so excited that the way that they run is just jarring, and I can always rely on Soren. I'll obviously I can rely on him to very evenly take me from one place to another. Because being in that position, it's makes you feel very vulnerable. It really does. Like if I don't, um, I can't even think of a similar experience because I'm still learning about humans and all of the stuff that they do. But the closest thing that I can think of, actually no, there's this thing in the news that Soren was telling me about because he actually was like one of the people that actually go and respond to this thing. But there was some kind of ride that like it lifts you up and it drops you. It was some kind of carnival ride, which I guess a carnival. It's not like a circus, but it's what is it? It's a theme park. I maybe I'm getting my words mixed up, but essentially, like you are attached to this disc, and it lifts you up, and then it stays there for a little bit, and then it just drops you. If you, based on just what I've seen from that, that's the closest thing that I can think of when it comes to being carried. You are essentially strapped into this thing, and even if it's a slow raise and even if it's a very slow drop, you just feel everything inside of you just lurch. And if it's not done smoothly, it's that same sensation of just this free fall. And knowing that you're not in control of that free fall, that just makes it worse. So, I it depends on who it is. It depends on what's going on, but sometimes I do ask if it's okay if they'll like bring me with them. That's essentially how I'll phrase it is. I like, like bring me with you, and they happily oblige. But I usually try and ask Soren because he's able to very gently and easily take me from one place to another. Also, he's something about those calloused hands. I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm not talking about that. I already answered favorite food, macaroni and cheese, unless it's not me cooking, in which case tacos, 100% fajita tacos. Soren makes great tacos. Do I miss my old life? Part of me does, but it's an ever decreasing part of me. And not because like I think that things are easier because of the circumstance that I'm in now. It's I remember what it's like to be lonely. I remember what it's like to be completely isolated and by myself. And I'm fine with being by myself. It's okay. It's good to be by yourself because if you are constantly relying on other people or if you can't be alone, it like you how do I even say this? You don't know what you are fully capable of in a good way if you aren't by yourself. If you are always relying on other people to help solve problems, or if you feel like you can't solve a problem, you like being alone reinforces and it makes you feel like really powerful. Being able to solve complex problems by yourself, like independently. And I know I can do all of these things independently. Like I know that. And there are elements like because I still get to go out and I get to borrow and I get to do all of the things. Like just because I know Soren and his brothers, it doesn't mean that I've lost that independence. Do I miss the secrecy? Do I miss the full range of motion in my shoulder, especially on cold nights every once in a while? Yeah. Um I don't know. There are definitely parts of my old life where I look back and I'm like, oh, like I used to do this so much more frequently, or like I miss how I used to make things, or like the tools, the ingenuity of it, at least. So sometimes I miss that, but otherwise, I don't think so. I think that I don't know. It feels natural. It feels good to be with Soren and his brothers. It feels like it was meant to happen, if that makes sense. Like it's not a bad thing that my life has changed in this way. what are some of my favorite things to do with the boys? I really like when we do like arts and crafts as a group. And that sounds really stupid. That sounds really cheesy, but essentially it's usually something where the boys have noticed that I'm doing something and they are trying to make something easier for me, or they're trying to be more considerate. Like one day, I still remember, they, one day, they came back with like these popsicle sticks, just dozens and dozens and dozens of popsicle sticks. And they had this hot glue gun and they had these rods, and like the boys were like taking measurements, and I don't know if it was supposed to be a surprise or if they thought that I was gone, but whatever the case is, ended up coming down and talking to them like, hey, like, what on earth are you doing? And they were essentially building this scaffolding, this like special staircase that goes like round and round and round and round all the way up to the top of the kitchen counter, so that I could either take the stairs myself to go like from the top counter all the way back down to the ground, or like this little elevator pulley system, because that they were essentially building this construction and having them like, oh, like, take well, I am proud of my height, but there's something a little bit deflating whenever you stand at your tallest and there's a ruler that is, towering above you, and you see your proud just over 4-inch height. Yeah, there's nothing like standing next to that rod with all those little markings on the side. I digress. Working with crafts with the boys is one of my favorite things, because watching Ray kind of get into this like ingenuitive side, and then Dorian actually, like, he's super super creative, um and he has like different innovations than Ray. Like Ray is very get in there and like, how are these pieces working, how are they going to fit together, and then Dorian on the other side like worries about like aesthetics and is able to essentially make things look nice. Like there's that nice line between like beauty and functionality, I guess, like somewhat making something work, and that he knows how to bridge that very well. um I like listening to Dorian like play around with his music. He's kind of getting into a little bit of stuff right now. And so he'll be tapping on different stuff. And so sometimes we'll like tap on that big screen together and kind of make something in tandem. And he explains what the notes are. And even though it feels like some kind of weird science that I definitely still don't understand, I like watching him get excited about that. Uh, as for Soren, like, I love cooking with Soren. I love talking to him. He always has something interesting to say. He always has some fun fact. He always has some fascinating thing to say about like what it is, and like why something is doing what it's doing, or the circumstances that he comes across throughout the day. So that is definitely one of my favorite things. I have something else that is one of my favorite things to do with Soren, but you guys don't need to worry about that. uh, oh, it's that hot in here. To the next. Do you know what illness you had when you were recovering on Soren's bed? Later, I'm pretty sure that it was like some kind of bronchitis, like a mix between the flu and bronchitis, because like based on the coughing and everything else, I'm pretty sure that I was trying to turn my lungs inside out every time I breathed. There was one other one that Soren said, but I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. But essentially, I think it was a compilation of a bunch of things happening simultaneously. And that is just what hit me the hardest because I mean, I could hardly breathe, like my nose was stuffy. I had that fever that it was just like this constant burning. I was always cold no matter how many layers I put on. It was like my bones were itchy just anytime I tried to grab onto a line, even lifting a foil spoon to eat what meager rations I had at the time. I, yeah, that it was just pain and aching. So, all in all, I'm pretty sure it was some kind of bronchitis or some other kind of lung thing. That's what Soren said anyway, mixed with the flu. Moving on. What are some interesting things you've learned about humans? Uh, I'm I'm not really sure how to kind of like go about answering this one. Like, are we talking about like interesting things like in general about what I've learned about humans, or like since I've been with like Soren and his brothers? I mean I guess I could answer both. Um, Interesting things that I've learned about humans is um I mean, there are a lot of interesting things that I've learned about humans, like, and like the some of the differences is like, I've learned a lot of interesting things about humans like independently, but ever since like being with Soren and his brothers, I kind of understand why humans do some of the things that they do, if that makes any sense. I'm trying to think of a good example. Uh, yeah, no, I can't think of any really like good example of like interesting things just because humans by themselves, like, how do I say this? Here's the thing. When you are in like a survival mode, sometimes you're not always focused on like why humans are doing what they're doing or what it is that they're actually doing. And so getting a chance to stay with Soren and his brothers has let me kind of get a better insight into like why humans are doing the things that they're doing. I say humans as if like Soren and Dorian and Ray aren't, actually kind of lump summed into that group. Interesting things. I guess I guess one of the interesting things that I uh, like still try to figure out about humans is like they collect things, and I mean they obviously pay for them. They like use money and stuff, but they just have things to have things. They don't necessarily have them to like always use them. I think that's really interesting because as me as a borrower, everything that I get or everything that I borrow is has some kind of use. Even if it's like, oh, like you need, yarn, like you need something to like to make a rug to lay down in this area. It's not just because, you want a rug, but it's to help sound absorption so that, whenever you walk across the floor, it doesn't creak in that same spot. It helps like muffle the sound of your footsteps. When it comes to like things that hang on the wall, like, oh, like we have nails to hold up all of our things. So I don't know. I guess that's one of the things that I find interesting is the accumulation and purchase of items that you don't necessarily need. And I guess that's the difference between like the need to survive versus like living kind of a comfortable life and putting value on those different items. Like, I mean, I've heard of other borrower families like kind of being a hoity-toity, like they kind of have this, I guess, elevated sense of self. because of the things that they were able to borrow. But generally speaking, we try not to borrow things that aren't going to be of some kind of use. Like everything that we get serves a purpose. And so I think that's something that's interesting. And then interesting with the boys, something interesting that I've learned. Other than they like their socks folded a particular way, I can't think of anything specific that I've learned. I'll have to think about that one. Yeah, no, other than the whole borrowing thing. If I think of something, I'll definitely have to let you guys know. But so far, I mean, that's pretty much the most interesting thing that I can think of. Who or what is Narrans? That is a great question. They kind of come in and kind of do their own thing. They ended up talking to Soren and all of the others, and myself included. They're kind of like this, I don't know, quirky storyteller. And everybody's kind of seems like, I don't know what it is. They just come and there's a peace. There's an ease talking to them. And I don't really know what they are. Not that is any kind of help whatsoever. But they're interesting. They don't seem at all fazed by the size differences, and there are just some things that they just happen to understand. And I don't know if that's from experience or I have no idea. They might be a better person to ask about that, whatever they are. I do know that they care a lot. They want to hear from us. They want to hear the things that we've gone through and our perspectives, our things, whatever entity this thing is. Maybe they do want to say something. I'm not the one who matters. I'm not the one who should be considered. I am us. Us are we. And we are they. And they are all of you. And they are me. What matters is them. I am the entity. They come through. I am the one who helps bring them to life. I am the one here to tell their stories. I am there. Well, way to go there. Because that's not weird and ominous. Great. Fantastic. With that being said, I guess that's everything that you guys had questions for. If I do a kind of a rocket version of some of the more generalized ones, favorite pastimes. Yeah, I've talked about my hobbies. Apparently I do have some weird quirks. Like anytime I have like a mug or something, I like to stir 9.5 times around, mixing coffee and tea. Even though I'm right-handed, I lead with my left foot. Um, I used to have a really bad habit of like chewing on things. It's just a weird habit of mine of maybe I saw it in a movie where like they test things where they like put it in their mouth and they bend it. I guess there's something about it, but that's actually how I lost my first tooth. So interesting on that. Least favorite things, spiders and snakes. I already talked about that. I don't like crunchy peanut butter. I don't know why on earth anybody would care for crunchy peanut butter. Hate me all you want. I will absolutely die on that hill. Creamy's the way to go because why would you put all of that work into making something just to throw the original ingredients back into it? Just have the original things, have them separate. That's a waste of resources. Dreams, yeah, I've got a lot of dreams, but you guys don't necessarily need to know all about them. I, if I had to summarize, it would be making sure that I help the boys in whatever way possible. They are just a part of my life now, and I'm a part of theirs. I want to help them succeed because I like when their eyes light up. I like whenever they get really excited about something. There's something great and wonderful about that that interaction. Um, yeah, fears definitely have my collection of fears. I've like I've kind of mentioned before. I sometimes am quick to fight, a little bit quick to temper. I don't like the idea of drowning. I don't like the idea of someone being in front of me and me not being able to save them. Like something bad happens to them and I could have helped them. I could have saved them. Uh, Talked a little bit about my childhood memories. Yes, yeah, my relationship with Soren at the moment is it's still private. Uh, I I do really like him, and I would it would be remiss to say that I think he likes me too, based on our recent activities. But again, that is none of your business. Um, I see over here, kind of like, oh, do I see Ray and Dorian as more like kids or like brothers? That they're kind of more like younger brothers, in my personal opinion. Um, Kind of talked a little bit about like what maybe want to go back and see them. I I was fascinated by how I was treated by mostly by Soren during that whole interaction with him, and so I mean not only because I was injured and because I didn't want to leave in like the dead of winter, like there were like multiple factors that went into it, but I wanted to learn more about them, like their personalities, their quirks. So that ultimately is one of the things that helped convince me to stay. Um, if I met another human who also had borrower friends, what would I do? I'd probably lose my mind because our entire existence almost seems predicated on the secret. And if more than just the boys knew, like how many other people know and are keeping the secret? And so like there are just dozens of people like this community, like you guys, who know the secret, this massive thing, and no one's talking about it. Like it's mind-boggling to think that so many people would be willing to keep this kind of secret willingly and not extort that. Unless I just have a very negative and skewed version of what I think people are and what humans are and what they can do or what they would be willing to do. Because the bad stories, that's my whole thing. The bad stories had to come from somewhere, right? It's not just a story that they told that parents passed down from generation to generation. Bad things have happened. I know people who have had bad things happen to them. That's just it's amazing that so many people could know about us and know about the secret and be like willing to keep that secret, and there'd just be so many out there. It seems like everybody would know at this point. So everybody knows this quote unquote secret, which is us, which is our secret of being, the borrower race. And so, like, there's so many people who know about us, but they're not talking about it. So it's still a secret, even though everybody knows. If that makes any sense. Because that's not convoluted or confusing at all. Do I see anything happening with Soren? Well, I kind of did last night, but that is none of your business. Why am I even saying anything? That is all that I have to say at the moment. There are no more questions to be answered, or if there are, if I missed any, I am sorry. All right. With that, I guess that concludes my whole Q&A. Great. If you have any other questions, or whether it's for me or for any of the others, definitely leave that in the comments, or however the thing works, comments or questions, however the story has actually managed to get out there, which that is still fascinating to me. Anyway, thank you guys for asking so many awesome questions. I, oddly enough, had a fun time doing this. Usually I'm not the huge, like, chatty kind of person, and the fact that I've talked this much, it almost freaks me out in a way. But I digress. I'm thrilled that you guys have enjoyed my story, and be sure to thank Narrans, because they're the ones who put the whole thing together. So, as Narrans says, cheers, and as always, stay awesome.